All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Paula Cox, and I am with WonderBotz. I'm joined today by my friends from UiPath, my colleague, Bhavesh Joshi, also from WonderBotz. We definitely came showing where we're from today. And then Tim Dixon is joining us as well. Thank you so much for the registrations, the questions that came in. They contributed greatly to our talk track and the presentation that we put together for you today. This series happens every month. We will give you updates on what the next talk track is, and it's safe to assume that in 2025, it's probably going to be centered around AI. So many of the registrants were already, not new to RPA, not new to machine learning, not new to some of these technologies, but asking a lot of great questions about what's next. How do we go further? How do we go bigger? How do we dig deeper into what it is that we want to invest? So we're looking forward to addressing all of the questions. And then, of course, we also save time to answer questions for those who couldn't make it today, because registrants will all be receiving the recording after today's discussion. Without any further ado, I'll go ahead and kick us off, and we'll get started today. So the talk track for us today is about operationalizing AI. We chose to focus particularly on innovating invoicing because there was quite a demand of folks trying to understand what it is that they're supposed to do in their accounts payable department. Traditionally, in emerging technology, this has been a place where we've seen a lot of adoption, a lot of early access. Why? Because there's a lot of volume. It's not the only place to start with AI, as we found, and we're here to talk about that today. We always start these webinar series with a little bit about what the innovation lever is showing us. We look at some of the advances, the analysts, how Gartner predicts that the AI market will be reaching 297 billion by 2027. The investments continue to increase, and the adoption rates are also just as quick. It's important for organizations like WonderBotz, for our partners at UiPath, to stay ahead of not only the pulse of the technology, but how it is that user adoption and businesses are leveraging these technologies. There's several opportunities in AI. Some of the use cases that we know and love, and actually before the discussion we're all talking about, is things like, hey, Alexa, remind me that I need to buy XYZ when I go to the grocery store. There's been so much nomenclature around AI that I think we forget that the nascent technology itself is something we've been using on our smartphones for a long time. Today, what we want to talk about is help you see that the business opportunities in AI continue to increase, and the use case opportunities and the business lines that can adopt AI are continuing to emerge, and folks are just asking, how can we get this? How fast can we go? And what's next? What's new? This year, we are going to be talking a lot about agentic AI. You know how when you call the airlines and they force you to do a little chat situation on your smartphone, and you're wondering what it is that the chat's going to say? That's chatbot emerging into agentic. What we're going to see today is the interface between humans and machines that collaborates in such a way that there's meaning, insight, and discernment in the responses that we get from our modern chatbots. So put away the term chatbot. It's the age of agentic AI. We're also starting to see AI models that are self-learning, self-soothing, understanding what it is that there is in terms of inflection, tone. Is the human angry? Is the voice upset? Is there something that we need to react or respond to? That continues to emerge as we move along in the course of different types of technologies that are beginning to emerge. Generative AI was the big buzzword in B2B last year. Everybody was talking about how we're going to do it, how we're going to solve it, how we're going to implement it. It's not going away. We're just seeing a little bit more prompt engineering emerging, and we're seeing just a little bit more in the generative AI breakthroughs in minimizing some of the development efforts in-house. AI for the financial institution, again, always leads the pack, always has a lot of automation opportunities because of the volume and because of the transactional nature of what we have to do day in and day out. We've seen a huge uptick in our clients that had been early adopters in automation, but are seeing that they can fine-tune what they had done in the past to make sure that they have exponential results in the future. So why are we focusing on accounts payable today? Well, we're not entirely focusing on accounts payable, But source to pay in the functional area gives us a lot of opportunities to give you ideas about where it is that you can automate and where it is that you can apply AI. It's not just in invoicing, it's all the way from the source to pay. And what you'll see in the theme of today's discussion is we're really talking a lot about data. At the end of the day, the accounts payable department is a place where it stores, houses, and transacts on a tremendous amount of organizational data. What organizations are trying to do in their advancement of AI is make sure that they have an approach to their data lake, their structured data, and making sure that they understand where, how, and when it's going to be applied. Accounts payable is a perfect playground for the ability to check out what it is that your data is doing, how we're going to transmit it, and how we're going to transact. So there's several opportunities throughout the AP department, and in invoice processing, which we'll discuss today, in understanding the data extraction that your organization needs, which we'll also discuss, and seeing where it is that the existing investments that you've made in your organization aren't for naught. It's important to not only leverage the stoic systems that you've implemented along the way, but understand where it is that you can infuse AI if the appetite is there for your organization to begin adopting. When we start thinking about how AP automation begins to go through, and I'm so excited that Bhavesh is with us today and he'll go into some of this, it's really important to take a peek at where the volume areas are. And once you start understanding the processes that you have, it's not necessarily cart before the horse. We've seen a lot of clients that begin to adopt AI, adopt automation without necessarily changing their processes. What winds up happening is that the change agents within the organization modify their behavior and begin to change processes because the automation has changed the way that the process works. It's really important to understand what the best practices are in automation. Just because a human did it one way doesn't mean that we have to model the automation to do it the same way. And we've really seen a lot of traction in clients that are understanding that concept, understanding that it's not just mimicking what human behavior is. This isn't going to replace humans. It's something that's not only going to augment an organization, but augment the individuals that are transacting and that are working for the organization. This is just a colorful little example of what we have here of the different areas that you can see the impact in. And today's discussion, like I said, is going to focus largely not only on AP automation, some examples of what we've seen in invoicing, but the majority of the questions that you guys asked as you were registering for this webinar series today were actually largely about how we monetize AI, how we think through our first use case, how do we reach across the aisle to the other counterparts in our organization to think through the best use cases that are going to have impact in our organization. We'll be sharing this presentation, as always, with everybody with some of the factoids that we got from our analyst friends. And now I would like to invite my panelists to join me for the panel discussion. Hello, Tim.
Good morning.
Hello, hello. Thanks so much for joining us. While everybody's getting loaded up here on the screen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Tim? Thanks so much.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on this webinar. Certainly excited to share some ideas and best practices and sort of give back to the community, as automation has been good to me. But I am the Chief Digital and Information Officer at a company called Regal Rexnord, headquartered here in beautiful Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I've been here about 15 months. The company is about a $6.5 billion industrial manufacturing company of engines, electric motors, and powertrain solutions. And if you think about an industrial manufacturing company with lots of legacy processes and things of that nature, not just in the invoicing space, automation and AI have a huge opportunity. And in my role, looking to take advantage of that for not only efficiencies, but also to drive growth for the business.
Thanks so much, Tim. It's such a pleasure to have you here, and I'm excited to talk through all the different areas that you're forging the path of digital adoption. Caleb, thank you so much for joining us. Our friends at UiPath, we go way back. We have these once a month, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. Hello.
Sure, yeah, thank you for having me on, and really excellent intro. It was fantastic.
All right, fantastic. And so Caleb represents the manufacturing space also at UiPath. And so he's going to not only share some of the places where we've seen clients kind of adopt maybe rethink and redirect kind of their investments, but also shares a great amount of wealth in knowledge as it relates to supply chain and some of the areas that folks are trying to adopt operationally. And Bhavesh, my colleague, we also go way back. I always tap you in, and I'm always so grateful that you're willing to share your expertise with the community. You want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, so thank you for having me, and I'm just happy to be among all of you. But yeah, I also share some of the same background, manufacturing guy and logistics and supply chain, but realize that technology is how we'll actually make those more competitive and better for all of us, especially as we focus more and more on the nearshoring and all that. I think this is one of the key lever that we need to pull on.
Spot on. And I love that you said that we're looking at, some of the different ways that labor is introduced, because I think what we're going to see a lot this year is this concept of digital labor, right? And
Yes.
really understanding it's not a robot, it's not some machine coming in. It's almost like this, new way of thinking through how we're adding digital labor and subsequent digital arbitrage is what we'll be calculating. So I love that you started off that way. So Caleb, I'm going to kick off with you today.
Sure.
We've been talking a lot, and I know that a lot of our clients, our joint clients have really asked, a tremendous amount of questions about, modernizing AP. So we would be missing the mark if we weren't to, to introduce just a little bit of this topic. There's been so many different modernization approaches. There's been so many different efforts, from outsourcing, in the 90s, that was the new craze, to some of the things that Bhavesh was mentioning now. And it seems like we still haven't solved it. So, I would love to hear from you. What are you seeing, when you talk to clients about how it is that they're modernizing their AP operations?
Yeah, great question. Great question. And obviously, thanks for having me on. And just by way of background for the rest of the folks on the phone, I've spent the last 16 years really in both order to cash and procure to pay. And just to start off with the smallest of stories, to answer Paula's question, I was invited to speak at a conference in Brazil in 2014, about 10 years ago, and someone brought up the point of AI. And I said, look, AI is one of those solutions that's always 10 years away, right? Like quantum computing or fusion or anything else. And folks came up to me after the meeting and said, I think you're right. I think, AI is just one of those things that's going to perpetually be 10 years away. And over the past 10 years that I've been focused on the AP side of the house, always from the perspective of working for technology, we really are at that door, as Paula said really clearly. And so specifically representing manufacturing and energy in terms of my role at UiPath, I think what you see, if you go back just 10 years to now and kind of a quick 30-second overview, you saw a lot of folks deploy ERP 10 to 15 years ago. And then I would say that the point solutions around really procure to pay and invoicing really took off in the 2010s. And then I would say automation kind of became popular within the AP space in the late 2010s, 2017 to 2020, kind of right before AI. Folks started using more automation to do two-way match, three-way match, and some of the basic functions along those lines. Then really only in the last 18 months, have we really seen Gen AI take off. And so what that means for our customers, just to put this in the context of a story, is picture your AP communications team with regards to communicating with the suppliers, receiving invoices either manually or through PDF in terms of email. And a lot of these folks that are in the AP departments handling supplier communications are inundated. And the reality is, even with automation, even with ERP, even with dedicated invoicing solutions, there hasn't been a good solution for the fact that 50% of invoices are received manually through email and mail, requiring people to route them, download them, check them, use an OCR, optical character recognition. And I think the largest change that's happening right now, to answer Paula's question directly, is that we are now able to use agents. And when we talk about agents in the context of this call for the next 20, 30 minutes, we really are referring to the ability to deploy a Gen AI model to make decisions and extract data as needed. And so if you think about your supplier communications team and your AP team, think about the fact that now you can actually deploy agents to automatically check the email inbox. I know everybody out there's got a placeholder, a Ariba inbox, if you will, for all of the emails that come in from suppliers. And now imagine you can deploy an intelligent agent who can scroll through the emails, download the appropriate attachments, understand the sentiment of the email in terms of what needs to be done, route it for approval, potentially leverage a robot to do a two-way match against a purchase order somewhere in the system, ultimately authorize payment, and then send final approval back to a human. And so that's really the world that we're in now. And I think that, at least speaking for myself in tech the last 16 years, I have never seen so much opportunity now, particularly for AP. And the fact that on average, according to Ardent Partners 2024, the fact that 50% of invoices are still received manually, or that is to say, still received through email and paper, this is such an area to really optimize. And so I think, in summary to your question, it's really about the fact that we can now, as you mentioned in your intro, Paula, we can now leverage the best of humans for the approval processes, the deep exceptions, leverage robots, which have been leveraged the past almost decade, that are very good at automating tasks, automating two-way, three-way match. And then finally, bringing agents. And agents is just a fancy way of saying we're talking about OpenAI, we're talking about large language models. And these agents are really the game changer, because now we're able to do a lot of the thinking tasks, like monitoring the shared inboxes from suppliers that have between 1,500 and 2,000 emails come in a day. And now we're able to monitor those type of communications like a human, respond like a human, while allowing the real humans to do the more value-added activity. And so a lot of times what I really tell folks is that we're at the beginning of an age where agents, robots, and people are going to work together, and not just in AP, right? This is going to go all the way to the shop floor in production, and it's going to go all the way into the consumer use of your given application. And so we're really at the beginning of that. But in closing, there is a maturity curve, right? So some customers are at the very beginning and just looking at automation, and that's fine. And some customers are more advanced in their journey, and they're really ready for deploying agents. And I think the key is to kind of know where you are on that curve, right? Do you need to tackle blocking and tackling? Do you need to look at automation? Or are you ready for agentic? Agentic just meaning deploying large models to make human-based decisions. And so that's kind of what I would say in a nutshell, Paula.
Thank you so much, Caleb. No, and I think that everything that you shared there, and we'll tactically approach some of those pieces as well. It's a great setup. It begs the question, and Tim, I'll direct this one at you, is how are we working together, right? Because all of these brilliant ideas about this robot and this agent, that is not what CFOs go to school for. They do not learn, in their pivot table, lessons and how we're going to close the books, what an agent is, what a robot is. And yet this is something that's going to be mission critical for them. So in your role, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about the novelty of your digital perspective, but the CIO and the CFO has traditionally been either friction points or best friends. So tell us a little bit about how you've helped enable the technology components behind the finance and accounting department, perhaps shared service centers when applicable, but really to try and get your counterparts in the finance department to understand the impact of technology, adopt, and deploy.
Yeah, great question. And I'm extremely fortunate to have been both a CIO and a CDIO. So I have both perspectives of the relationship with the CFO, and they are in fact different. I would say in my role as the CIO of Generac a few years ago, the relationship with the CFO was all about describing productivity gains, cost out. I'm sure folks in the manufacturing space understand that. Challenges, go-gets, reduction of budgets towards the end of the year. It was really around efficiency and cost, operational and cost effectiveness. Now, as the CDIO, I am responsible for showing that digital can drive growth at a 60-year-old industrial manufacturing company. So I've had to come up with a brand new vernacular, so to speak, a brand new set of frameworks, methodologies, processes to not only define what digital means for this company, but also define a process, a vernacular, a language, a set of new metrics, KPIs, and what I refer to as a digital scorecard to bring in these ideas for either AI, generative AI, agentic AI, or other areas around digital technology, and really work with the CFO to define a framework that quantifies the value that we would expect to get if we were to invest and spend money, which these things do cost, dollars to put out there, and resourcing and time to really get an accurate picture around the business value that's going to be generated from any one of these technologies. And they could be very hard metrics. They could, a chatbot could generate brand new revenue growth from customers that you've never done business with before by cross-selling and upselling products that they never had the opportunity to purchase before. Or it could be a learning opportunity. We're going to go play with this agentic AI to see if customer service representatives actually become more efficient at what they do by allowing automated responses to customer inquiries through an agent. So it's the upfront conversation, it's the upfront qualification in terms of how you're going to evaluate this new digital ask, AI, generative AI, et cetera, and then how you then will prove that out to the business and in terms of outcomes and benefits and KPIs after they're deployed. And I would tell you that there is a lot of trust in that relationship. There has to be a lot of trust for a CFO to agree to allow me to take up my budget, to move spend that might be in one area such as ERP and shift it over to our automation, RPA or AI. There needs to be a lot of trust there. So you need to get a win or a few quick wins out of the gate, which we have been lucky to be able to do. And so you're furthering the trust, you're furthering that relationship, and there's more investment that can be had as a result of that transparency.
Absolutely. And I think I always stand up for my CFO friends. I've always, communicated on their behalf. And they're not just the CFO. They don't want to just deny you of every payment. They just want to understand where the money's going, right? They're responsible for some of the largest line items in an organization. So it's so important that we really begin to understand. I think vernacular is the perfect way to say it. We have to translate this in a way that's measurable and understanding, to what their goals and their objectives are. And so Bhavesh, you lead the strategic team at WonderBotz. You've worked with clients with complexities that that we haven't ever seen before, all the way through to the easy peasy stuff that folks are trying to automate. And I think this term that we kind of have been socializing, digital BPO, kind of outsourcing to the cloud has emerged a little bit. Tell us a little bit about some of the supply chain operations and how it is that that portion of the AP process is beginning to adopt digital transformation and not transformation, but truly operationalizing AI. It's not just a buzzword anymore. We're really seeing clients adopt this at scale. So we'd love to hear a little bit about some of what we've been doing on the WonderBotz side in that space.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. So I think Caleb and Tim hit on some of the items, but one of the things that Caleb talked about was the process maturity side. So as we now keep talking about the agents, and my friends who are actually probably in supply chain and manufacturing know APQC process classification framework. So when you think about it that way, a lot of people, of course, did the RPA, but what we've been doing with the customers is that, hey, obviously not completely agentic AI yet, but saying that, okay, if you are thinking about this invoice processing, then we are going to actually help you with the framework that actually is going to create intelligent document processing. But more importantly, we'll work with you underneath it that, okay, you are going to be the first people who are going to monitor the fraud, because we are actually having the data lakes that are connected and the ML models that are actually going to help you prevent any fraud or detect any fraud, or even supplier performance that, hey, because you can see the shipment performance as part of the AP processing, even though there are logistics people doing it, you can actually also help and provide that strategic input and the dashboard that, hey, these are what some of the things we are seeing from this area or this supplier side or this commodity side, so that you can actually start making strategic decisions in simple things like this too. In some cases, I remember like an AP department had helped that, hey, you keep buying this as a spot purchase. And now that we've been actually automating and we have this data collection and the dashboard from the workflow, why is it a spot purchase? It should be actually something that we would have had some strategic sourcing and negotiations happening with it. So as Tim also mentioned, it's all of these things actually resonate with the CFOs and them, because they're all real money, they're all real manufacturing, on-time delivery, and other performance. So that's really how I'm seeing a lot of things. And I still believe, because this is real money that we are talking about, that it will take some time for some of these agents to basically be completely autonomous. I'm a big fan of human in the loop. So that's like my biggest thing whenever we are starting out with something, that okay, it's actually not even human in the loop, but human as a reviewer, that even if you just say that it's done and it's done, but some of that will require even to train our machine learning models. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing as part of like where supply chain people are doing things and how they are thinking about deploying in the steps and maturity.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think a human manager makes a lot of sense too, right?
Yeah.
At the very least, having the oversight there. And so more and more we really are seeing that trend. So Tim, I'm gonna come back to you. I know that at Regal Rexnord, you guys launched your automation program last year, and you're not a novel, player in the game of RPA and launching this. I know that you have a tremendous amount of history in understanding and adopting and monetizing technology. Tell us a little bit about, how it is that you've gotten that digital adoption portion. This new role is so fascinating to me. And I love that you've not only gotten, the cost center portion of your IT agenda done, but you've also got this evangelizer role, that's kind of been baked in. So tell us a little bit about how that adoption of, automation started, at Regal Rex and what you guys are aiming to do, with that capability going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, once again, fortunate to be in a space where I've been able to leverage RPA technology and UiPath now for my third company in a row. And each of them have been a different experience, and each of them have started in a different way. And at the end of the day, my job as a chief digital information officer, you mentioned evangelism. I almost call myself the chief evangelism officer, because any digital initiative it has to start with education and awareness. Let's put it this way. When you're in IT, when you're in a digital team, the technology is in your face all day long. You're participating in wonderful webinars like this. You're reading blogs. You're on LinkedIn. You're attending conferences. A lot of other folks in the business don't have that same luxury. And so they might not know what agentic AI is. They might not know what a chatbot could do. So I've gotten very creative, my team and I have gotten very creative with how we educate our business partners about all these various different technologies, whether they're lunch and learns, having a vendor partner who supports some sort of technology in this space come in and offer to educate folks regarding their platform, their product, best practices, etc. I have a monthly lunch and learn. I refer to it as my digital Lunchables, where we have a vendor partner come in and just educate both my team and the business team as to what this new technology can do. And just naturally, somebody would get excited about that and want to take that to the next step, whether that's a proof of concept or some sort of prototype or just some additional research internally in terms of how we could use it. The second thing that I'd like to think is, and there's various ways of doing this, but outside of education and awareness, if you make it fun for your business partners to participate, whether that's a hackathon, whether that is I hosted the company's first generative AI leadership summit before the holidays, where I had 3 vendor partners come in and pitch 90 minutes apiece of what their technology can do in the agentic and generative AI space. And they got a chance to spend time with them via a booth, kind of a rotating booth, speed dating type of setting, where they had learned about what the technology could do, and then they had an opportunity to go back to the partner directly and ask questions in terms of how they could use it in their space. And so some engaging, some interactive type of event where not only they learn, but they can ask questions, and it helps them sort of rationalize themselves, the space in which they serve, and how, what business challenges could potentially be solved with this technology. One of my most famous and fun events I did with UiPath at my last company, I was still on the tail end of COVID, so we were taking a virtual approach to this, and we held a virtual workshop where we invited business partners from all over the organization, and we had a virtual Miro board where we asked our business partners, after they were educated on RPA, where they thought some of the biggest automation opportunities could be within their process world. And they immediately just started cranking out and filling up this virtual Miro board. And I think at the end of the day, we had 25 people participate. We got over 100 ideas from that virtual Miro board experience. So you got to evangelize, you got to educate them, you got to give them an opportunity to ask questions, you got to give them an opportunity to sort of personalize that for them, and then just make it fun.
No, and I think make it fun is exactly right, because there's so much hesitation because of fear, fear of the unknown. What is it going to do? What does this mean for me? And so making it, something that is not only a community building spirit, but this stuff is changing all the time. There's always a new Lunchable topic to have, right? And so I think it's important to continue evangelizing and having folks understand, you don't need to be afraid of this, right? It's better to embrace it, and get on board, because the ship has taken off, the boat, as Gartner likes to call it. So Bhavesh, that's my favorite one. So I'm going to come back to you, and some of the areas that Tim talked about, is really getting everybody excited across the organization, right? And so I'd love for you to elaborate on some of the different areas where digital adoption is taking place, some of the different functional units and business units. That was definitely a question that came up several times, and we have a plethora of different job roles and job titles that registered for this webinar. So let's touch a little bit on how, maybe Tim is the one that forges it in the organization, gets everybody excited. How does that adoption begin to happen, and how do folks begin to budget for initiatives like this?
Yeah, so especially in manufacturing companies and retail companies or heavy supply chain companies, as much as we are talking about AI and agents and all that, it's still the biggest issue is real time or any visibility, right? Like, where is my order? Where is my shipment? Where is my approval? So I think a lot of that unfortunately still happens, and rightfully so, because there are specialized people who know what to do, or where is my quality requisition that's approved for, so I can ship this order. So there's so many of those things that happen. So what I feel, and we have something which we are rebranding called ReportBotz, but that's like a democratization of actually information collection that anybody and everybody gets benefit from. And then if you really take it further, then you say, okay, now that you're collecting this information more on automated or autonomous way, can you now start making the decisions from it as well? So we just need to be careful that we be mindful that ERPs and other things that are system of record, they are going to be the system of record. And there are certain other systems of record for quality management systems or transportation management systems like that. So we are not trying to replace those systems of record. We are trying to say that as they exist, how do you actually leverage the information from them and the people that are actually working with it, whether it's as simple as starting with data collection and information visibility, or using them to do the probabilistic machine learning model to suggest decisions, or eventually have deterministic agents that actually make decisions for you. But I think that's really how the whole rhythm of the organization works, and that's really so important.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, you touched on it, which I'm surprised that it took us 35 minutes to get there, but the importance of structured data, right? And that's where everybody is aiming to go. The Stoic systems aren't going anywhere. Those investments in your ERP or your HR systems, those aren't going anywhere. It's how we interact with them and how we structure our data and streamline the different pieces of information so that we can rely on machines to begin making decisions on them, right? And so structuring data has been one of the thorns in leaders' sides for a long time, because you don't want to just have a place to dump it all, right? Data lakes are having to get streamlined a little bit and understand that. And as Bhavesh mentioned, we're seeing a lot of folks adopt this structuring data automation because it's the first step. Once you start getting kind of those swim lanes in order, then it begins to give you a few ideas on what's next. So Caleb, I'm going to direct this next question to you, because I think it's also important, Tim mentioned it, this stuff does cost money, right? We're not just saying, okay, it's, we're democratizing the way work is done, but it does have a price tag on it, right? And value means a different thing to different people. ROI is measured in different forms and ways. And when you're trying to think through something like agentic or digital labor, how is it that folks are thinking through their investment? How are clients beginning to adopt this, and how are they factoring it into their budget? Is it still an innovation? Does it still sit with the department that's actually being the beneficiary of the automation? Is it centralized? Tell us a little bit about how people are procuring these new technologies.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and there's definitely a variety of approaches, but at the end of the day, I would say sort of the most successful organizations are doing a mix of continuous workshops, as Tim was just saying, so that the idea of automation doesn't get stale. And so before Christmas, I did a tour of a lot of our manufacturing customers in high tech, and what I noticed kind of set apart some of the best in class manufacturing versus, let's say, lower maturity was the fact that they would do monthly workshops with the users. They had a high degree of involvement from kind of citizen developers. In a couple of our clients, we've seen upwards of 1,000 people involved in citizen development. Citizen development, for the people on the phone, just means folks that are technically capable enough. By no means does it require, Excel macro skills, but technical enough to create automations, create agents, things of that nature. And third is sort of this concept of annual value adoption. And so the best in class companies really do a good job of looking at what is the value received in the last year. And Tim hit on this earlier as well, but there's really two levels by which to look at the return on investment, right? There's cost reduction in terms of, was I able to reduce cost from potentially an SG&A perspective, which is to say labor? Was I able to reduce cost by being more efficient? In what ways did I actually realize the cost reduction that my CFO could go take to an earnings call? And the second is cost avoidance. So cost avoidance would be, I've got the same people working in the same job, but they're doing it much more efficiently. They're saving hours and they're able to reallocate their time to other kind of value-oriented activities. And then finally, third, in some cases, there's opportunity for revenue uplift as well. We had a manufacturing client who was able to free up resources in AP and go leverage them for other areas around logistics that were able to basically take on additional routes and drive new revenue. So at the end of the day, it's a constant focus on, one, making sure that the idea of automation and of course in the future AI doesn't get stale by looking at least quarterly workshops. Number two, making sure you do at least an annual value review, right? Looking at cost reduction, looking at cost avoidance, and looking at potential revenue uplifts as well, and making sure that your CFO is aware of those as well. A lot of our top customers will see that they'll actually mention improvements in earnings directly attributable to work in either automation or AI. And then last but not least, getting the folks involved. I think for an organization of 10,000 people to have over 1,000 citizen developers means that folks are actively engaged and using the technology, right? And so tracking adoption is really a key vector of value as well. So those are kind of a few ideas.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I think it's important to note too, we do have a, multi-billion-dollar manufacturing giant on this call, but it doesn't mean that cost avoidance isn't something that can be measured in a smaller organization. There was a lot of folks that, registered for this as well that are in middle market, small business. And cost avoidance means perhaps you don't grow and bloat your back office the more revenue you procure, right? So there is a forward-thinking way to look at this and understand that this technology is being democratized for all shapes and sizes as far as organizations go, industries alike. So Tim, I know that, in the changing landscape, that being said, teeny company meets teeny company, large company buys small company, the M&A world continues to persist. And some of these tech investments are 2-3 years of commitment and investment with some of the SaaS providers and some of the way that the commercial terms work. So Regal Rex, being a very acquisitive organization, tell us a little bit about how you think through, either in the planning side of what's to come in M&A and or leverage and adopt some of the things that maybe you've acquired along the way. You had some really fascinating stories that I think will help some of the folks on the phone today.
Yeah, I have a saying that sometimes it's better to be lucky than good as a CIO or a CDO. In this particular case, I was more lucky than good. But automation can start from various different angles at any given company. Our case here at Regal Rexnord, being around as long as we had, there was not an automation COE or automation program until we bought a company in 2023 who was a UiPath customer and had some UiPath licenses and had done some things in the HR, finance, and sales area. And so I saw this when I joined at the end of 2023, and I thought it would just be an awesome opportunity to start our journey here at Regal Rexnord by showcasing the work that this smaller acquisition had done at a smaller scale, and use that as the education, the chief evangelism, chief excitement and enthusiasm officer role coming out, but also give that smaller acquisition a chance to play in a bigger pond and be more of an influencer and a champion than just an acquired company. So we leveraged the best practices and the lessons learned that acquisition had gotten from RPA technology over a number of different years, and that actually kickstarted our official, corporate automation COE program, of which we're obviously scaling here today. So I'm still very grateful for that experience. There's still users, obviously, as we've deployed additional use cases, but that gave them a really good integration opportunity to take what they'd done at a smaller scale in the bigger machine of the acquiring company.
Fantastic. No, and I think it's so important too, because you were also kind of instilling that, we're coming together as one. And I think that's what automation ultimately is. It's the great connector within an organization. So that's such a tremendous story.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is that if it worked at that smaller scale, the larger processes, obviously at a bigger company, are a bit more complex, but it may not be a complete end-to-end automation as could be desired in a larger company. But if it could solve a smaller portion of that, that's a great way to get started.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to boomerang right back to you, Tim, because I think not only, since 2023, have you taken that, made it, adoptable for the organization and some of the processes that you guys have automated along the way. But you've also been, the first one to raise your hand on all the new stuff, right? And so, last year in Vegas, it sounds like you had a bit of a road show as well, at the organization at the end of the year with this booth set up, which sounds fascinating. I want to talk to you more about that, at a later date. You guys are adopting agentic, and you're getting prepared for your sales kickoff, which I love, because it's not just back office, it's not just supply chain. In the front of the house, we are saying sales wants to optimize the way that they're doing things. So tell us a little bit about your agentic adoption, what you guys are doing, and then we're going to check back in with you in a couple of months and see how that kickoff went.
Yeah. So once again, better to be lucky than good. I mean, there's a reason why vendor partners have conferences and invite customers to them, because you want to see the latest and greatest and what's being announced. And honestly, I would say I probably had not heard much about agentic AI before I went to UiPath's Forward conference in September, October timeframe last year. And it was a big part of the messaging. Caleb, I'm sure, was a big part of that as well. And both myself and my team members got educated around agentic AI, and obviously got to talk to UiPath colleagues of where it could fit the best. And as we came back and shared that with the team, I think it's a very, very important aspect. If you go to one of these conferences, you come back and share what you learned at that conference with the team, which we did in my town hall. However, where we kind of saw this playing out was there was definitely a huge aspect of sales with agentic AI, and particularly sales assistants. And so as we came back and educated the company in terms of what use cases could come into play, yes, there was definitely a CRM, if you will, customer service use case that people got excited about, like I said, as opposed to picking up the phone and responding manually to a customer inquiry. Things can get automated for certain inquiries for certain products from certain parts of the organization, from certain division customers, from certain distributors, from certain parts of the world. So that is where our first use case of agentic AI is being deployed. But as a result of showing what it could do, one of our senior executives on the sales team, who is hosting our sales kickoff next month, came up with the idea himself that he would like to leverage agentic AI at our sales conference and have it kick off the sales conference as Regal Rexnord's sales assistant across the enterprise. And so could we have come up with that idea eventually on our own? Sure. But if we hadn't shared the possibilities and had these discussions with our business partners and opened it up to ideas from them as well, such as the sales executive, we wouldn't be doing nearly as half as what we're doing with agentic AI. So we're super excited about what it could bring. Once again, got to quantify the value, got to quantify in terms of the automation, the benefit that it brings. But you're in a space with sales, either in customer service, CRM, or the sales kickoff, to have a direct impact on revenue and customer experience. So I think we're starting in the absolute correct space.
Oh, that's fantastic! I can't wait to hear how that launch goes. We'll have to get footage of how that works, and you can keep the NDA stuff intact there. So we are about 10 minutes until the end of the webinar, folks. Just remember, you can submit some questions. We do have additional questions that have come in, via registration that we'll address. I'm going to ask all the panelists to join in on this next question, and Caleb, I'll start with you. What is next in AI-powered technology? What are we going to be talking about this year? And why is it important for leaders to find, kind of their tech partner or their tech, advisor along the way? Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing this year, and then I'll go round robin with the rest of the panelists as the questions start coming.
So as I mentioned kind of at the beginning, if we just talk about invoice processing, kind of back to our example, there is going to be a maturity element. And so for the folks that are at the beginning of this journey, or maybe smaller companies, I think what we're going to see is that they're going to start dipping their toe, so to speak, into automation and being able to basically handle the 50% of invoices that are coming through manually that aren't going through straight through processing. And so I think that's the first thing we'll see. I think the second thing that we'll begin to see this year I'm going to focus on sort of low and high maturity. I think the next thing we're going to see for really high maturity clients is really deploying agent into supplier communications for real in the real world for the first time. And so what that looks like, as I mentioned earlier, responding to emails, handling manual exceptions, potentially participating and or leading RFP events for sourcing events. And so I think that it'll become more normal this year for certain large companies to have agent-driven RFP events, RFQ events, and broad kind of supplier communications, right? So one of the things that takes up AP's time the most is simply responding to, hey, when am I going to get paid? What's the payment terms? I think you're going to start to see agents being able to text that information, email that information, and also handle phone calls. And then finally, last but not least, I would say one of the big movements we're seeing as well is in the contact center and field services. So that is to say, outside of the corporate functions, where can we deploy agents? And the reality is we can get folks like who were on Tim's team a lot more efficient by not wasting time out in the plant on the wrong activities, by deploying agents to help do scheduling and planning. So I think that's what we're going to begin to see. And a lot of times, in the United States, people tend to think of manufacturing as sort of behind other industries like IT, but it's not necessarily true. I would say manufacturing often are the folks that come along and optimize the process to perfection. And so when you think about making a commodity again and again perfectly each time, right? You take for granted your Coke can, your car, et cetera. And I think we'll begin to see that as manufacturers adopt agents. You're going to see a lot more prompt engineering, right, is something you talked about. You're also going to see more around trusted access layers. I was with one of the global, big three auto companies in December, and they were talking about the fact that they want all agents to operate in a controlled environment so that no bad decisions get made. And so I think what you're going to start to see is the creation of new laws and new techniques and new governance rules around how to leverage these AI agents. So again, kind of a duality for next year, but I think you'll see movement both in the low and high maturity level.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that, Caleb. And Bhavesh, I'm going to direct it at you, same question. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to pull up contact information for the panelists, folks. So feel free to connect with them. This QR code goes directly to their LinkedIn. And so Bhavesh, I'll turn to you. What do we see this year? And why is it that folks are just, why is our phone nonstop on help? How do we go? How do we go faster?
Yeah, I think because people are realizing that as much as there is an AI component, there's a tribal knowledge. At least in the world of manufacturing companies, we used to call that there's a tribal knowledge. So how do you translate that knowledge that people have into actually making eventually the decisions that are going to become autonomous more and more, right? And I think so in that sense, everybody's starting with this right use cases, because there's a lot of and supply chain for most manufacturing companies, as well as the customers' order management, is where most of the as they say, the drum beats are set up, right? So for those two areas, I see more and more the request for quotations. So like Tim's mentioned, sales agent, right? Like how many times you know that if you just reply to RFQ in the fast pace, you are most likely to win that order versus not, right? So having those type of simple but very tangible things that are making the difference are going to be the focus areas. So I believe it's going to be all about customer interactions, and it's going to be all about internal and external supply chain management, where a lot more intelligence and a lot more decisioning actually is going to come.
No, I think you're spot on. And Tim, I'll direct it at you. You've certainly never said no to getting help from external places. And so tell us a little bit about how you select that and how you keep yourself up to speed in this ever-changing landscape.
Yeah, so just pure coincidence, regardless of what we think 2025 is going to be, and there's naturally going to be something that pops up this year that we're not even thinking about or know about right now. We still have to get value out of what we've concepted and deployed in 2024. Just last week, I posted on LinkedIn my how I thought a valid approach, because you have to have an approach or a methodology or framework to do anything in this space. I posted sort of my top 10 list of how to approach a generative AI initiative. And so if you want to go check that out, I think it'd be extremely valuable. And it has to start with best practices. Somebody else is doing something that you're not, regardless of who it is, whether it's in your industry or outside of your industry. You can learn from that. You can use that material to help educate your team or your business partners. And that could be some kind of a launching point in terms of how it might be used at your company. We don't leverage best practices enough. I think it's awesome because I have a wide network of vendor technology partners who are willing to share that information with me. That's what they do. Caleb's on the call here sharing UiPath best practices, and that is just an awesome place to start. It's a kickoff point, and it generates that conversation of possibilities that you need to have with your business partners to do any of the stuff that we're talking about. But I will say, CFOs are very smart. I work for the CEO. He obviously is a super sharp guy. You're going to have to deliver and show the value. You're going to have to get creative. This isn't an ERP project. It's not, infrastructure. It's not measured in uptime. You have to show how this is providing business value and generate business outcomes as expected or as something new that hadn't been planned, because ultimately the investment will only come if you show the value. So I think not only generative and agentic AI, I think 2025 is the year where we actually prove the value of these innovative solutions.
No, I couldn't agree more. So we'll open it up for questions. I haven't seen any formally submitted into the Q&A feature. If you guys want to submit there, that's fine. There are a couple that came in on the sidelines, so I'll go ahead and launch those. There was a clever bunny on our registration list that said, is AI artificial intelligence or automated innovations? And I like that. I like, as the marketer in me is squealing on that one. So I'm gonna throw that one at you, Bhavesh. What do you think of that? Artificial intelligence or automated innovations?
No, so I think it's actually both, in the sense that, and it is right? So the best companies are actually the ones that are innovating the fastest and the most, right? So now you are talking about, and actually that's one of my favorite use case, is how do you use the AI technologies to go through the sensitivity analysis and to go through the QFDs as you are doing your innovations in your product development lifecycle, rather than actually in the past world, you had to do so much of prototyping and piloting and all of that. So how do you actually now use AI to start your automated innovation is really a very big thing, and smart companies are actually doing that and making sure that they leverage that technology.
Yeah, no, I thought that was really clever. And then the other one, and I'll direct this at Caleb first and then kick over to Tim, is what reading materials do you do? What favorites do you save? Where do you get your AI information? I think that's a fair question. Caleb, you're up.
That is such a good question. I always am amazed how often people come to me kind of asking for that information. But I do listen to a lot of podcasts. Believe it or not, the New York Times has something called The Hard Fork, which is kind of an excellent podcast around trends in AI, and it's I would say it's at the exact right technical level. Again, the podcast is called Hard Fork, and it's sort of it's not low level, it's not, it's not in the weeds, but it's also not so high up it's not actionable. And they talk quite a bit about AI. And then I also try and make time with folks like Tim. In fact, I'll probably be setting up time with Tim regularly after this meeting by way of example. So I really do try to spend a lot of time with our customers. I mentioned before Christmas, I did a bit of a tour with our customers, and that's really important. The funny thing about AI, like the weird dichotomy of AI, is that the more that we start to leverage AI and agentic, of which 10 years ago I said was always 10 years away, and now we're here, is that it actually promotes more in-person face-to-face meetings for the people side of it. And so just 2 weeks ago, I participated in a big agentic workshop for an energy company in California. And the reality is we got so much more done in person discussing how these agents would work with regards to the LLMs than we would remotely. And so it's a funny way of saying that these are very complex topics. No one who's in the workplace today studied these in school, technically, right? We're talking about 18 months, right? That OpenAI and other models from Anthropic and Amazon Bedrock have been out to be leveraged in business. And so we in the business world are learning this real time. And so after today, I'll send out a list of podcasts that I listen in addition to Hard Fork in case others are interested. But the two things are, yes, listen to as much as you can. And it's a great way to, I don't know if anybody else goes running like I do, but I do that while running or going to the gym in your case. So just get more osmosis going through your head, because the reality is the more osmosis you have around hearing these terms and words, the more it's going to make sense. And number two, get together with other people in person and just write this out on a whiteboard, right? Just literally draw out where an agent could connect into a process. And the best workshops that I've been a part of, maybe in my career, but at least the past year, have been, in-person kind of agent-focused workshops. So anyway, two kind of large answers there.
No, that's awesome. Thanks, Caleb. I think everybody loves a good tangible answer to their questions. So that's fantastic. And Tim, how about you? Where do you learn all the things?
Yeah, so I think you have to personalize it for yourself based on your role, your interest and your appetite for learning. But I was a CIO. I'm now a CDIO. I subscribe to a lot of CIO and CDIO newsletters just based on my role and my network. And there's a ton of them out there. There's a Wall Street Journal one. There's a Forbes one. And then obviously there's CIO.com and CIO.com and CDIO.com. And so I leverage those outlets of which I'm a active member and participant of. That's number one. Number two, you're paying these strategic vendor partners for a reason. I regularly ping them for latest and greatest content, and they're always interested in sharing case studies and what they're doing with other customers and decks and things of that nature. So I get a lot from them. And then last but not least, I read books. I mean, it's kind of old school, but last year I read an awesome book from Eric Siegel, who's well known in the AI space, called the AI Playbook. Basically, it gives you a playbook in terms of how you can deploy a predictive AI within your company. And I read a book over the holidays called The Savvy AI Leader. And so once you start reading some of these books, you get recommendations, obviously, from Amazon and things of that nature based on what you bought, what you read. Here's some other things that folks like you also have read. And so I always try to read 3 or 4 books a year in this space as well, just to kind of keep grounded on what's going on out there. But I think the best thing that I do, and I would recommend this to anybody, I have a wife and 2 kids and a dog. I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that is my quiet time to read. And so if you have an environment like mine, it doesn't happen at night. It doesn't happen during the day. It certainly doesn't happen at work. You got to make time to make the learnings happen. And that's my time for that.
That's fantastic. What great advice. Go ahead, Caleb. Were you going to add something?
No, sorry. I was just saying, I saw some people laughing on finding free time. And look, I hear you. I'm in the same boat. 3 pets, 2-year-old daughter. Potentially more on the way, we'll see. But the point is that you do have to make the time. And if you can't actually make the time in terms of a dedicated time like Tim was talking about, one of the things that I do is I'm based out of Houston, Texas, and we have a lot of clients here in the Houston area. And for those of you that live in a big city, Dallas, LA, Houston, Chicago, it's an hour to get anywhere. So when I'm driving to a client, I'll just put the podcast in the ear. I kind of prefer to listen than to read, even though I used to be the opposite. And so I know many of you are probably the same way. So if you're picking up your kids like from daycare or school, that's a great time. Just put in an AirPod, pop in a podcast. Again, I'll send out some recommendations after this meeting along with Tim. And so the message there is don't worry about creating time. You can fit it in to other activities that you're doing and then passively kind of get the content.
Thanks so much, Caleb. Well, guys, we're at the top of the hour. What a robust discussion. Thank you for answering all the questions. The information for connecting with these folks. The only thing I will add to this plethora of good information from everybody is network. Everybody is scrambling to learn more, faster, bigger. So the more you talk to people in this space, the more you'll get answers and you'll recognize that you are just, in the same boat with everybody else trying to figure this out, right? And so we have these monthly webinars. Hope to see you all, and the information will be shared with everybody, some of the feedback, as well as the recording to those who were unable to attend. So hope to see you guys next month. February 25th is the next topic. What is the talent that organizations have to think through when adopting AI? So it's going to be a good one. Thanks again to our panelists for your time and attention, and we will see you next month. Thanks all.
Thank you.